Joe Biden has been formally certified as the winner of the presidential election. And the certification of the president-elect caps off a very chaotic day in the US Capitol. And this morning was the first time the Capitol had been breached since 1814, with scenes of chaos and violence. Let's bring in my panel now. Tonight I'm joined by 2GB broadcaster Luke Grant and Outsiders co-host James Morrow. James, I've got to start with you as an American, an expat. What's America under President Biden and, more importantly, Vice President Harris going to look like?
Well, it's been quite a day here, Cory, with everything that happened in Washington last night. It's really something. I mean, we now see the Democrats suddenly becoming all pro-cop, pro-law and order, anti-riots after everything that happened in 2020. And now we see them all of a sudden saying, hey, this civil disobedience, maybe not such a good thing. This was, of course, a terrible mess, and I think it indicates how Trump, in the wake of the election, I think mismanaged his whole endgame and a potential transition for his presidency. But, what we're going to see now is, I think, a Biden presidency. We've already seen China say that they are welcoming Joe Biden coming into office because they think he'll be easier to deal with. In other words, they'll be able to steal everything that's not nailed down a lot more easily than under Donald Trump. And, of course, we have the ever-present threat of when does Kamala Harris make her move? When does Biden bow out? Biden has, of course, health problems, which are starting to now be talked about. Of course, you can start talking about them now that he's won the election because, the end game, I think, ultimately is to bring Kamala Harris into office.
Yeah. Luke, were you surprised about how quickly the narrative surrounding riots and police and democracy changed? I mean, it spun on a dime after months, as James pointed out, of saying these are peaceful protesters, people are looting and rioting and smashing up the streets, targeting police officers. Now suddenly they're all on the side of law and order. And as I said, the box of piousness they're lecturing from. How does it happen so quickly?
Well, it's hypocrisy. It's the mainstream media in the US, and it's the voice. I mean, anything Biden and the Democrats say gets broadcast and is spoken about glowingly. Anything that the Trumpster says or anyone from Team Trump says is, of course, laughed at or banned by a social media giant, whatever it might be. Today was appalling. I heard your opener, Cory, and I agree. I agree also with you. I think many of us hoped that someone from outside the body politic, someone who dared to put the people first and not play the global game, someone that was there ruling this huge democracy, it did give us some hope that perhaps there was a different way. And it's disappointing that it didn't turn out that way, but the numbers are the numbers. They had their chance in court to present their case. They weren't able to do that, or they weren't able to find a court to accept that argument, and it's. I have to say, someone like you was in the Team Trump corner. Very disappointing. But you know what? 4 years of this, the Democrats have tossed away of Donald Trump. It was never seen as legitimate. And I know there's a bit today of, they've done that, so the Trump team's in there. They're right to do what they did today. No, you're not. You're right to be better than them. And I know that's probably motherhood and apple pie kind of talking. It's better to be decent. It's better to look at them and think, thank goodness we're not them. We didn't see that today. It's such a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. I've spent the last 2 months waiting for the Kraken, but it hasn't appeared, so I'm moving on. But I have to tell you that one thing that has encouraged me was some figures today that were obtained from the Home Affairs Department under Freedom of Information revealed that undesirable killers, are there any desirable ones is the first question, suspected terrorists and spies from almost 100 countries have been deported from Australia. James, surely that's good news. Isn't this a really positive step from the government?
Well, yeah, although I have to wonder how many people have just committed a crime to get deported so they can get a ticket out on a plane somewhere and go travel. But I do think that it is a good, it's a great thing. I mean, there will be always the sooky lefties who go, oh, no, this person grew up here. Oh, this person has a family here. Oh, this person has a home here or whatever. They shouldn't be deported. I know the New Zealanders, particularly in the Ardern government, especially love to push that button and say, oh, absolutely terrible whenever we, deport any New Zealand criminals back to New Zealand. But you know what? No, this is exactly what the government should be doing. If you do a crime here and you are not a citizen and you don't have a right to stay here, then you don't have a right to stay here. You have no right to complain. And this is something I think the government does deserve some real applause for.
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of Australians now think it should be tougher to become an Australian citizen.
Yes.
So that there's a longer time of assessment. You can talk about that in a second, Luke, but I want you to have a look at the footage of a war veteran who was attempting to help a teen that was being beaten up by a Melbourne gang of 15 people. Now, this veteran, Ben Woolley, is in the red jumper. You can probably see him on the screen as a result of the aftermath of that. This is a man who's a good Samaritan that has paid a very, very dear price. Now, how much worse is it going to get in the streets of Melbourne when gangs are attacking people coming to the rescue of others, Luke?
Absolutely appalling, Corey. We're talking here about, let me talk about the Australian character, what we stand for. It's unacceptable to think, first off, Ben is a hero. He runs on his own to a group of 15, picking on one girl. And they then turn on him and they so assault him as to render him temporarily unconscious. When he comes to, he doesn't, seek to find refuge. He goes again to protect the girl. This bloke served in our uniform. He's worn our uniform. And what we've seen there is cowardly, and it's not to be tolerated. I note in the story, we're talking here about alleged Sudanese nationals. Well, I know what the answer to the question, what should happen to them, is. I think it's pretty plain for us to see. And linking that to the previous story that you and James spoke about, this is I don't know why it's freedom of information, Corey. This is a great story. I don't know of a listener of any of the shows I do that doesn't want to hear the good news that the government, if they discover someone that's here that breaks the law, does the wrong thing, we turf them out. Because, we should turf them out. But in the case of Ben, we have to look after him. He wore our uniform. And those Sudanese nationals identified in the story, ta-da, you blew it.
Luke, you make an excellent point there. This is a very good news story for the government. I absolutely agree. I think the Patriots would love what Ben Woolley has done and wish they had the courage or the skills or the tenacity to do it themselves. But James, Would you believe we found it very difficult today to get someone from the government to come on and talk about not the Ben Woolley incident, but about this good news story about sending criminals and killers and spies, deporting them? It's beggars belief the government wouldn't be shouting this from the rooftops.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's amazing that we had to go through an FOI request to get these numbers. But this is the sort of thing that the government should be talking about, saying, hey, we are out there protecting you. They're doing great at protecting us from coronavirus, but they're also got to protect us from criminals and undesirables. This should be a headline story. They should be pitching this story to the newspapers. Newspapers should not have to go out and get this story out of them.